Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the last webinar for this year's fourth annual Sustainability Week, Businesses Leading on Climate Change Solutions. I'm Mark Han, GreenGov Council Director. Today's webinar is co-hosted and supported through our partnership with Penn State Sustainability, which is responsible for developing strategic programming and partnerships to promote sustainability through its university campuses and the Commonwealth. I want to thank Peter Boger and his colleagues at Penn State Sustainability for their partnership pulling these events together. There's quite a bit of work involved to make this all happen, and it's been a fantastic partnership over the last several years. The GreenGov Council was established as the Commonwealth Agency's Lead by Example program, promoting energy conservation and sustainable governance. Our charter sets forth performance goals for the Commonwealth, ultimately steering the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions within our Commonwealth portfolio. And I want to take a moment to thank our presenters who contributed to this year's Sustainability Week events. We have showcased some fantastic climate leaders throughout Pennsylvania who are doing great work in this space. And if you happen to step away and you missed any sessions and any presentations this week, again, all the presentations are recorded and will be posted on our GreenGov website. If you had registered in advance for any of the sessions, you will be notified when the recordings are available via email. And then finally, I want to thank all the attendees for joining in to hear the presentations. We appreciate your continued interest and participation in Sustainability Week, and we hope that you'll keep up the momentum with us in advancing these important topics through the coming year. Our monthly sustainability series actually starts next week on Friday at noon and runs through monthly through spring of 2025 with lots more great presentations. So we hope you'll join in. So for today, though, we'd like to jump right into the presentations. Some of us on today's call may be wrestling with how best to reduce emissions in our buildings, or you might want to see more clean energy installed in your local communities. Others may be here today to hear how businesses are leading on climate challenges and the types of support they are offering to their clients. So today we'll get some insights from our top-notch presenters and business leaders. We have James Manser, Vice President of Global Government Relations at Johnson Controls, and Tim Evans, President of FNB Equipment Finance. So first, I want to introduce James Manser, and then we'll move into introducing Tim as well, and then we'll get started. So James serves as Vice President of Global Government Relations for Johnson Controls. He leads the company's public policy and advocacy efforts with a focus on issues including energy, environment, trade, and technology. With over 2 decades of experience in government affairs, James has gained valuable insight into the intricate dynamics of politics, policy, and corporate advocacy. Previously, he served as the head of government and external affairs for a prominent global pharmaceutical company. In this role, James oversaw all government affairs activities and also managed the Patients Assistance Program, chaired the Political Action Committee, and led the Corporate Philanthropic Committee. And earlier in his career, James served in senior positions for a variety of political campaigns across local, state, and federal levels. He also held executive leadership positions in the public sector, serving 2 gubernatorial administrations and holding local office. And then after James, we will hear from Tim Evans, President of FNB Equipment Finance. Tim Evans is president of FNB Equipment Finance, an arm of Pittsburgh-based FNB Corporation, providing leasing and financing options and specialized vendor programs to organizations of all sizes. He has 4 decades of experience in equipment financing industry, joining FNB in 2016. And during his tenure, FNB Equipment Finance crossed the $1 billion portfolio asset threshold. And in recent years, Tim and his team have worked with various utilities and organizations to provide financing for large solar projects from Pennsylvania to North Carolina. And with that, I'd like to give James the floor, give you an opportunity to pull your slides up here. And when you are ready, you can get started. Appreciate your time.
Great, thank you. All right. Can everybody see these slides?
Yes, looks great.
All righty. Mark, thanks so much for putting this together and kicking it off today. I want to make sure everybody can hear me okay as well. Volume's good.
Yeah, you
All
sound
right,
great.
great. Thank you. So before I even go through the slide deck a little bit, I'm gonna already give a caveat at the beginning of the presentation, which is I'm a little over 3 months into this role with Johnson Controls. But the interesting part about that is I had worked in the pharmaceutical industry for years, and when my company was building a new state-of-the-art manufacturing facility, they worked with Johnson Controls, and that was my first exposure to them. And to see what this company was doing in every aspect of the project to save energy and really focus on reducing any adverse impact to the environment. I just really appreciated the company, and every single person I worked with, I really liked the corporate culture that they had. And so when I saw this position become available, I was very fortunate to be selected for it. So to give you a little bit of background of Johnson Controls, who we are, what we do, some examples of it, even our work in Pennsylvania. And then, I don't know, Mark, do you want to open it up for questions then at the end after both
Yeah,
presentations?
yeah, we'll wait till after both presentations
Great,
conclude. Yeah.
great. So about Johnson Controls, we're a leader. I know it's a text-heavy slide, but we're a leader in smart, healthy, and sustainable buildings. We're in 150 countries throughout the world, and we believe that what you can do with buildings can achieve spaces that improve well-being, achieve climate goals, save money, and make you more efficient. So delivering that growth. We have presence in over 90% of the world's most iconic buildings. I mean, globally, you can point to something that you probably have heard about or visited yourself while traveling, and Johnson Controls is somehow working with that building. We've been in business for over 140 years. We have over 100,000 people globally, 37,000 in the United States. We work in HVAC space. We work in electrification. We work in fire suppression, and we provide technical services that I'll get to later. That's really creating a digital platform for building management. And in addition to manufacturing products and installing products, we also have a service business, and we also have a solution side of the business. So oftentimes there are organizations that are trying to figure out how to be more energy efficient, and they're call on Johnson Controls and say, how can you help us? And if they, let's say, for example, want to have a solar application, we can design a project and figure out how to make it most efficient for their needs. But we would go and install other products, like in this case, solar, that we don't manufacture. We're out there in a variety of ways, just trying to reduce carbon footprint globally. A little bit more about the company. Uh, on Forbes Global 2000 list of the largest 2,000 companies in the world, Johnson Controls this year ranked at 397. And I also wanted just to include some of the other accolades about the company. I'm very proud to work there. The corporate culture, that my colleagues, the intent on having a diverse and heard workforce. It's just a great place to work. Now, a lot of this, if you were to just look up online, these first couple slides, I'm going to go very quickly through them, but just to give you an idea of what we want to put out there and that we practice what we preach as far as setting and achieving our own sustainability goals as a company. I borrowed some slides from our sustainability report. Again, I'm not able to put it in the chat because of our corporate restrictions on the chat here, I think, but you can simply Google the Johnson Controls 2023 Sustainability Report, and you can take a deeper dive if interested. But as a company, here are some of the goals that we have and our progress towards them, where we're either meeting or exceeding our own reductions. Our Scope 3 carbon reduction strategy, and where we're at in that regard to receive a 16% reduction by 2030. greenhouse gas emissions, and our social impact and employee experience. And again, that's everything from what we do to provide education for our employees and internal advancement to the diversity of our workforce and our suppliers that we work with. We have metrics internally for how to achieve more corporate diversity as well. And it just, in general, we're trying to create a ambitious culture that is very well engaged and create a zero harm environment. And one other quick example, even down to our packaging, we're rethinking, like literally, if you look at some of these pictures, every inch and every material of how we do things, just to be more efficient. So that's a little bit about how to we practice what we preach. But uh, I'd like to give a little bit of background when I talk about that history. Johnson Controls is a conglomerate of many different names that you've probably heard of. So, talking to folks in Pennsylvania, I'm sure a lot of us have heard of the York chillers or York air conditioning. Uh, I happened to on our intranet see that in on October 1st, 1937, so a little over 87 years ago now, we installed the air conditioning in the U.S. Capitol building. So, as the head of our global government affairs, I found that pretty interesting. um, and so that's a picture then. But when we talk about now, the building on the right, that's our JDAC, what we call it, the Johnson Controls Advanced Development and Engineering Center, where we uh, meticulously test equipment, not only for the quality standards, but the energy reduction and efficiencies to give it longer life moving forward. And that's just off of 83 as you're heading down to York as well. So I have a couple photos of inside that building. I'll start with the upper left. We're just in the last month, Jim Cramer, who you may hear on the news, from the investor community, as well as several other news outlets have been looking towards Johnson Controls as a leader in data center cooling. As we all know, data centers run hot. Data centers have a tremendous amount of energy consumption, and also we're using more and more as we move towards AI. Even for the simple changes that have been made for any Google search with the AI that appears, that's really driving energy demands. And so data centers are a big play because we need that for where we're going as a workforce. But at the same time, we still have some grids that are at capacity in the U.S., and we don't want to have adverse impact on our local community. So how do you strike that balance? And with Johnson Controls is trying to develop technologies so that we can achieve that efficiency so that we're not putting as burdensome a requirement on those local grids, as well as coming up with innovative solutions. So that photo on the left is actually our sound room, where we can actually test for both the hum and decibel output of chillers. It To be in that room when they actually close those doors, and that doesn't do it justice. You can see if you look in the bottom left how the person standing next to the chiller, how small they are in comparison. And if you look into that room, you can see some equipment on the left there, and I'm just kind of do the comparison of just how massive that room is. When they close those doors, you can hear your own heartbeat. So where it's quite an experience. Environment. But what we're trying to do is to make sure that the equipment that's going out there, and in some cases, even having sound frequencies that reverse any sound from the equipment to neutralize it, that's where that's being developed. So this is by far a world-class leading institution that's right there, probably about 35, 40 minutes outside of Harrisburg. And it's where we test all of our equipment. So uh, another Pennsylvania connection I wanted to share is that the U.S. Department of Energy had an interest from Defense Production Act for heat pump production capacity. So I think we all recall there was a thing called COVID that impacted us not that long ago. And it really made the government take a step back and say, while we are proud to work in a global community, what do we want to make sure that we have the capacity for right here in the US? And so through the Defense Production Act, they've provided additional funding for strategic initiatives for the United States. And so that's everything from, the healthcare space so that, we don't have to worry about vaccine production or gloves and masks in the future to how do we, take a look at some of the critical infrastructure and reduce energy utilization. So they gave a grant to try to increase heat pump production capacity domestically. And Johnson Controls was awarded this $33 million grant, which the way it works is the more that it's a cap. And so the more that we spend on increasing production and show the receipts with very specific criteria that the government wants met, we can have a portion of that expenditure reimbursed. And so, it's really up to us to figure out how much we want to build this out in conjunction with what DOE asked. And very proud to say that of the three sites that we put forth, one of them is in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania. And this will create jobs as well as have the multiplier effect of people working on equipment moving forward. So when we take a look at why a company like ours is so focused on what we're doing beyond just the history of the company at large, the science is clear. So when you take a look at how you can make a positive impact, we can take a look at vehicle by vehicle or home HVAC unit, a variety of smaller ways that to achieve a certain impact, you'd have to do it on a very large scale. Given the fact that we keep seeing global warming and increase emissions, one of the most fastest ways to accelerate change is to take a look at buildings because buildings contribute nearly 40% of global emissions. And so, that's really where our focus is, and especially in that industrial space, which I'll dive into in a moment. That's really where we want to focus. And so, a lot of business owners and property managers see their buildings as a challenge. And so, you've got this space, just to heat it and cool it, you're going to put out a tremendous amount of money. And so, that's been a challenge to them. But what we want to say is let's reimagine this where you can actually see creating efficiencies in your building, just change the mindset from if you're spending X in a given month and you can reduce that amount through efficiency, then that's an opportunity for you to reinvest that money elsewhere. And so that's where we're leaning in. And frankly, this goes to my third bullet. It's bipartisan. As somebody who works in government affairs, we all view the world through our own filter of what we do. And, for me, I view it through a very political filter. And, for a period of time, there was hey, I don't know if I want to sacrifice what I'm doing for my business to try to do something to lean in on sustainability. And so some people tried to make that a partisan issue. And really, first of all, we're all living on one planet, so nothing can be a partisan issue. It's how we work together. But more importantly, it doesn't matter what your filter is, whether it's leaning into sustainability because you're careful of environmental stewardship, or you're leaning into sustainability because you're trying to have additional capital or hit a certain metric at the end of a quarter, and you need that energy cost savings from your building. It's something that our solutions serve both. And so 70% of CEOs are now at the point where they say sustainability has a proven financial impact. And so they are legally bound to be fiduciary stewards for their companies. And I think, leaning into what we can do, everything from having more efficient, faucets in a bathroom to having different electrical equipment that has less resistance and heat given off that makes something less efficient to the chiller technology, you name it. There's a variety of ways out there that businesses can lean in to save money. And, there's a creative market that's opening up around this as well. And I'm very excited to hear, some of that later on today from my co-presenter. One of the things that we do at Johnson Controls is to try to come up with creative solutions. So, for example, if there's a school district that spends X every month in their energy use, but they know that the HVA system is near the end of its life, or they're looking to make something more efficient because it's not properly cooling where it needs to, for example. We can work with that particular district and say, let's structure it so that you're still paying X every month, but that large air handler that you need, you can pay us from the savings that you're going to have every month. And so we're creating these very interesting deals on how to move forward with that kind of technology. So I'll give you a case study of what we've done. This is my first tour when I came through. So these are my pictures. If they're not the best, who to take a look at. But I did a walkthrough of the Ronald Reagan International Trade Building in Washington D.C. Massive building that's in the government's portfolio. And so what the GSA had looked to do was to take a look at what buildings they have and figure out how to use some Inflation Reduction Act funding to make these buildings more efficient. And so these are some of our chillers that are in the basement of that building. And we had folks from numerous government agencies, not only the GSA, but even Department of Homeland Security coming through on this tour to actually see what could be achieved and where they can apply savings to save taxpayer money. And so in just this case, we're looking to save the taxpayers $6.2 million. Here's another picture from the tour. The gentleman giving the enthusiastic thumbs up, he actually works in the building full time, and it gets all the different data that we have because the digitization is very important to energy efficiency to manage where the energy use is and what we can do to continuously improve on the project. And so you can see the row of chillers on the left side, but I'd like to draw your attention to the right side here, this reverse osmosis system. As a lot of people know that DC is a very swampy area, and so the bottom of the building, over time with different cracks and seepage, actually was getting water that was collected and pumped into the sewer system. So the government had to pay a sewer fee to dispose of the water coming into the building. One of our technologies, other than just the on the HVAC side, we actually saw this and made the problem a solution by putting in this system that collects the water, ultra filters it, and uses the water into the chiller system. You don't have to buy additional water, and you don't have to pay the sewer fee to pump out the groundwater. And so it's another example of how we came in and innovatively solved a solution. The stats on the left are really eye-opening. So in addition to that row of optimized chillers that you see there and the high efficiency transformers that I mentioned, it deliver the power more effectively and don't have that large percentage loss that's going through in heat or storage. They were able to reduce energy consumption by 42%, reduce water consumption by 50%, because again, they're borrowing it from the filtered system, and eliminate 20,000 tons of greenhouse gases annually, which is 4,500 cars from the road. So this is just an incredible project. And as I mentioned before, with that energy savings performance contracting, they're able to pay for everything that you see, in this project from the savings of the project. So that'll conclude my portion. I'd love to be able to talk later and answer questions on some of the ways that Pennsylvania is really leaning into this, like their Rise PA program. or a little bit more on what we're trying to do in data centers or even healthy buildings where our customers include hospitals where having clean air is and the filtration systems that we provide. It could be life-saving to schools where we can reduce the number of sick days that students have that set them back in their education, to offices that have to have the PTO for the sick days used, and you also lose productivity by having members out during different periods. So with that, I'll stop. Thanks so much, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, James. Excellent presentation. And we'll give Tim a chance to pull up his slides. And if you have questions for James, please do drop them in the chat, or at the end of this, we have plenty of time that we can have an engaging conversation. It was cool to see the corporate commitments and the investments in Pennsylvania going on. So that was really nice to see. I can't wait to talk about it with you. So at this point, I see Tim has his slides up. So,
Let me go. Turn on my camera here.
Okay. Yeah. So again, Tim Evans is president of FMB Equipment Finance. It's an arm of Pittsburgh-based FMB Corporation, and they provide leasing and financing options for organizations of all sizes. So, Tim, when you are ready to go, you have the floor. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Hey, welcome everybody. Glad to be part of this event. I think I don't need to say a whole lot about myself. Mark handled that in the beginning. Other than I feel really old when I hear four decades of time, so that makes me feel old. But anyway, just very briefly about FMB, First National Bank and FMB Equipment Finance, right? So we're the bank itself is $48 billion, just shy of 50 billion. The equipment finance company is 1.5, just shy of $1.5 billion in outstandings. We are a Pennsylvania-based bank. We've been around for about 150 years, and we got our start up in Hermitage, PA. We have significant presence in Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, Scranton, Lancaster, and obviously up in the Hermitage area. We have 189 branches in Pennsylvania, and so Pennsylvania is our core and the roots from where we've all started. So I'm going to speak today more about how we approach financing solar and any other renewable energy. There's a lot going on, so I'm going to probably be at the 10,000-foot level. I can answer any questions after, or if there's other questions people have, reach out to me directly. I'm more than happy to answer. So with that, I'm just going to jump in here. So when you look at what we do every day, oops, page down. Sorry, folks. Am I not getting that? Okay. So there's a lot of advantages to renewable energy, and it's not just solar. For this conversation, I focus more on solar than I do anything else. But we are active in the biomass fuel space as well here at FMB and have financed that. So I can answer questions about that as well. But the primary advantages, I think some are very obvious, right? When they passed the Inflation Reduction Act, the ability to transfer investment tax credit and to garner bigger pieces of investment tax credit was meant to spur the activity and grow the amount of solar and renewable energy in the industry. And it has done just that, right? The other thing it's done is it's given us the ability for the municipalities in this instance, you're able to future-proof your infrastructure, meaning you could build solar to fund your business. You can fund your buildings and your gyms and any other buildings that you have that you'd want to fund. You could have your own power right there. Another significant piece of that is, being able to tell the world and your community that you're green and that you're generating your own power. It will attract the younger generation. Some of the older folks still haven't bought into the renewable energy concept. I'm not one of those people, obviously, but at the end of the day, the social side of this is, you want to do your part and everybody wants to pitch in. So the benefits are there, and having that in your community is obviously a very big statement to make. And it's becoming bigger every day, because I can tell you the solar the number of solar opportunities we're being presented with today is just it's dwarfing and everything else that's going on out there. And then there's the obviously there's the environmental benefits. It's important to all of us, right? We want to reduce our carbon footprint and do as much as we can to get away from fossil fuels. So that's what we're driving.
Tim, you muted yourself.
How's that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. So anyway, I'm going to touch on each of these points at a high level. But first and foremost, that when you look at solar and you look at renewable energy in the municipality world, there's a lot of options, right? You can put them on top of buildings. You can put them in lots. You can vacant lots. You can put them on top of garages, on top of entertainment venues if you have those. So it's something that when you start to think about it conceptually, there's a lot of opportunity there that if you step back and look at the big picture, you can put a lot more out than you expect. The equipment has been easier to define, easier to acquire in most cases. Okay, and as the supply chains get better, I really believe it's going to get more efficient for those of us involved in this space. I'll tell you that the biggest challenge today is still getting panels. Right, the majority of the panels are coming from Asia. There are new facilities opening in the U.S. and we're hoping that they catch up. But right now, that's the biggest drain. But I would say that when you're looking at all the different aspects of this, the supply chain has improved tremendously. So I'm encouraged by that. But right now, be really candid, it's 6 to 12 months if you're ordering panels today to be able to get your panels. So keep that in mind. The other thing is some of the larger EPC contractors that are out there have already gotten their names in the queue. So when you start thinking about planning these things, be aware that the bigger, more established contractors are could have a queue, and you'll be able to get your product to completion a lot quicker. Give you an example by some of the issues with the equipment. We just had one of our projects, an inverter blew, basically failed, and it took 13 weeks for them to get a new inverter. And what that means is it was 13 weeks where there was no power being generated from this facility. So a real detriment to the cash flow. And inverters are big, expensive items. You don't keep them in inventory. So in this case, the supply chain really caused an impact to that project for almost 3 months. So just kind of a heads up. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about all of these things as it relates to the installations things in a later slide. But the goal is that you don't want to extend out your construction as far as you possibly can. You want to shorten that cycle because money's out the door during the construction phase, which means there's interest expense to finance that. And there's ways to get around that as well. And I'll talk about that in my last slide. So, but there's a lot of different ways to finance these. People can get pretty creative with the investment tax credit value that's out there. Could be upwards of 50 to 60% of the equipment cost. You can get pretty creative to try to absorb some of the costs because these are expensive, right? Solar installations are expensive. The biomass fuel facilities are expensive. You're talking multi-million-dollar installations in most cases. Okay, so I would tell you one thing as I close this slide out. When you start talking about financing these projects, just whoever your financing option is, make sure they've done it before and they understand how to go about putting it together because there's a lot going on and there's a lot of different nuance to it. But you don't want to get engaged with somebody who's learning for the first time. It's very costly. Okay. All right. So we all know the Inflation Reduction Act really opened up the ability for ITC to be transferred to a third party, right? And that is the biggest proponent to what's driven all this growth because it used to be the owner of the ITC was the owner of the facility, and that quality was a detriment to growing, right? So now that we have the IRAs is in place, the potential it's grown dramatically. contractors and developers are now jumping into this space because they see the opportunity. They can benefit from being able to monetize the investment tax credit. So I will say to all of you what I said to every relationship officer here at First National Bank when they first passed the IRA. I called it the Wild West effect because everyone wanted to get there, but nobody knew exactly how to get there because they hadn't done it before. There have been other established players out there, but if you're a contractor or a developer and they saw the chance on a $5 million project to generate $1.5 million or $2 million worth of investment tax credit, and they can now sell that tax credit for a fee, that was, oh boy, eyes glassed over, and they just went at it hard. So I caution everybody, when you get into this, do it with people that know what they're doing and they're experienced. There's a lot of you'll hear people talking about, I want to sell the tax credits and I want to monetize these tax credits. And it's just, to the developer and the contractor, that could work to be huge windfalls for them. Not always the best thing for the end user or the lessee. So just a little bit of caution right there. Okay. Make sure your EPC contractor, they've done this in the past and they understand what they're doing. Okay. So let's look at the different options on the ITC, right? So it shows here, and I'll tell you the base ITC on this, if you look at the top line of that graph, is 6% on 1 megawatt, right, or bigger. But the reality is it's 30%, because you see the next line down. If you achieve the wage and apprenticeship requirements, you get another 24%. So the baseline realistically is 30. And I say that because if you see up there in the first bullet, the prevailing wage, all that you have to be able to represent is that you're paying the wage that you would pay to any other individual doing a similar job. So if you've got an EPC contractor who's done this before, this is basically as close to a no-brainer as you're going to get. They're not going to bring in labor and pay them $10 an hour. They're going to pay market wages to install your facility. And to do that, that gets you that you accomplish the prevailing wage requirement, right? So we're starting out at 30%, and that's 30% of the equipment cost. Now, there's domestic content requirements that you can get additional adder, which I'll talk about on the next slide. And then there's energy communities, which I'll talk about on the next slide as well. So there's a lot of adders here. And so it doesn't end at 30%. So if I scroll down here, so domestic content, I'll talk about this just for a minute. When you look at domestic content, they're telling us 40% of the installation has to be U.S. originated, right? Manufactured in the U.S. That's hard to do, not impossible to do. If you have U.S. made panels, you can get there very easily. If not, as you saw on my second slide, there's a lot of different equipment. There's the ground mounts, there's a wiring, there's the inverters, there's a lot of other pieces of equipment that you can include in this, and they set the bar low. It's only 40%, so you can achieve that, and that gives you an extra 10% of ITC, right? The other thing is energy communities, right? If you go out at energycommunities.gov, you'll see the government has basically laid out the entire country and created energy communities that also qualify for additional 10%. An energy community could be, it's a brownfield within a certain radius of a retired mine or a shuttered steel making facility. Anything like that, it gets lumped into the energy community bucket. So that's an additional 10%. If you're in low income community, or you're involved in a residential building that is also low income, you get an additional 20% of investment tax credit. So if you start with 30 and you take any 2 or 3 of those, you can get yourself to 60, 70% investment tax credit. So on a $5 million facility, you could actually get $3.5 million of tax credit on that deal if you met all these criteria. So they've made it extremely attractive to get into this space and to grow the solar. So they're there, and if you have a good developer, a good EPC contractor, you can qualify for quite a few of these. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little more detail now about the 2 primary options. Right, option 1 here, it's called the direct pay. In the direct pay, the municipality is the owner of the facility, right? And it's not just, it's any state, local government, tribals are also included as well as nonprofits, right? So if you decide you're going to build a facility, okay, and it's a roof mount, right? And it costs $3 million. I'll just use an example. Of that 3 million, and you qualify for 30% ITC, or let's say 40. Okay, you got 40% ITC on 3 million. That's $1.2 million, right? So you get there, you build your facility. Once the facility is COD, means you've delivered, you would then file a tax return with the government, and you would have an ITC tax credit of 30% or 40%, whatever your number is. And that is a cash payment back to the municipality to basically offset the cost of the facility. And this is my example slide here. I'll just walk you through this again at a high level. The municipality owns the facility. Okay, you have to own it in order to take the ITC and get the cash payment yourself. You can hire a developer to install it, operate it, maintain it, the project for the municipality, but the municipality needs to be the owner for the ITC. So in this case, here's my example. Okay, $3.5 million install, 40% ITC, so you get $1.4 million. Okay, so the municipality does it, just files a standard tax return, and the government will send them a check for $1.4 million. Now, you would expect that you would take that $1.4 million and reduce that cost of that system by $3.5 million. So I have some numbers here that I'll go into detail on my slide that talks about cash flow, and that'll show you how this works. But the bottom line is, what I did is I took the revenue, that's the annual revenue generated on a 2-megawatt facility. It's about $242,000 a year. The payments, and I assumed a tax exempt rate of 5.6% for 15 years. And so your cost is about $207,000 in your monthly, that's your monthly payment for the debt. So again, cash flow is good, right? You want your cash flow to be good. I'll explain that in a little more detail when I go over the cash flow slide. So at the end of the day, you're pulling about $35,000 a month in excess revenue over payments out the door, right? So that obviously that's what you're driving for. And this is just one example, and I'm going to show a second example where you look at the equipment financing side as well. But this is very real, that happens every day. Municipalities, if you have the access to the capital markets and you go out and float a bond issue or something to pay back the balance, this is a very real scenario to pursue. So the second one is leveraging the ITC with a sale leaseback. I use the exact same scenario. The only difference here is the lessor, in this case, First National Bank, FMB Equipment Finance, any other equipment finance group, anybody who does equipment financing could do what I'm describing here. This is not, I'd love to tell you it was exclusive to FMB, but it's not. We've done a lot of them, but there's other people that do them as well. So they're out there. But in this case, we would own the asset. We would be the developer, have the ITC run through us at the bank. For that, there's a reduced payment. You'll see the payment there is $171,000 versus the $207,000. The revenue is the same, the term is the same, the ITC, everything else is the same. The difference here, quite frankly, is the municipality does not come out of pocket during the construction phase at all, because the developer and the finance company would handle all that, and that would be built into the economics of the transaction. So it's a little cleaner, and it's in my opinion a lot less involved from the municipality's perspective, but you get the benefit of the ITC, just get it through the reduced payments. And then at the end of the day, you see there's an early buyout option. Why I list that is there is a point where the ITC can't be clawed back. So, and why that's relevant is after the ITC is up, most lessees of solar or renewable energy, they want to own the facility at some point, because then the cash flow becomes dramatically improved once you get most of your debt paid off. So in this case, I set up an EBO at year 6, which 5 years is the recapture period on investment tax credit. So again, just another option, but I'm going to flip down Are you there? Did I lose everybody?
Yeah,
Nope,
briefly, you're back.
yeah,
I'm
I
back.
wasn't sure if
Okay.
that was
Hi.
on my end or yours, but you're
I
good
don't
now.
know. I didn't. All of a sudden, I just was getting that sound. That you're losing it. Okay. I'm sorry. Do you know? Can you tell me where I was?
You were just coming off of option, well, you're coming off of option 2 on the last slide.
Okay, all right. So this is the cash flow, and this is the way finance companies look at these projects, right? And I'm not going to get into a whole lot of detail. There's a lot of information here. I'm just going to highlight what's important, right? So this is for 6 years. You look at this is the actual electricity produced year one, $3.7 million kilowatts, right? These are the buy rates, right? The PPA rate versus an SREC rate. And I will talk about the PPA right now. It's a good time to discuss this. So when you're entering into building a solar facility or any renewable energy facility, you have two decisions to make. Are you using this power for yourself, meaning your municipality? Are you going to sell it to the grid? Or are you going to sell it to an entity, whether it's another utility? And then you would sign a PPA, which is a power purchase agreement. So most of these scenarios, there's a PPA involved because if you're an equipment finance company, you want to see where the payback's going to come. You don't want to just roll the spot market. Okay, it's called the WAMPA rate, which is wholesale market pricing, and that's WMPA, right? Well, that fluctuates up and down significantly. So your cash flow repayment source could really, at some point, could go upside down on you. You don't have enough cash flow to cover your debt service. So when you're a finance company, that's what we look at. We want to see the fixed revenue so we know that the payback will be there, right? So I'm looking at you have 3.7 million kilowatts of energy generated. The selling the electricity by itself, you see PPA revenue of $124.9 thousand a year. The SRECs, these are the solar renewable energy credits. They are sellable in the market, and those prices fluctuate. But right now, I put in there $31. I think they're actually selling for 35 right now. So they do fluctuate up and down. Rarely do they go down. So the SRECs, you're generating 117,000. So you get a total of 242,000 a year in average revenue. Okay. Expenses. There's always you'll hear people refer to O&M. That's operation and maintenance of the facility. There's not a lot that goes into operating and maintaining these facilities other than you do upkeep the ground around. If it's a ground mount, you have to upkeep that. You will continually replace panels as they age out. Some of them you will get panel failure. So in this case, it's a rough percentage of the overall project, but it's an average on an installation of this size about $23,000 a year. So you can see your cash available for debt service, at the $219,000. Lease payments are $171,000. So you've got excess cash level about $48,000 a year, right? What we look at, you see debt service coverage. Why that's relevant, I talked about it just a second ago, right? The banks and finance companies want to know there's enough revenue being generated from your project that it covers the debt service. You don't want the municipality to have to come out of pocket at all to pay for this. That should never happen. Why I say that is you get upside down sometimes if you're dealing with someone who sells the ITC out and you don't get the full benefit of the ITC into the project. So, but you should never have a situation where you should be less than 1.2 times coverage on your debt service, right? So if you ever get upside down, you got to really look hard at that project. There's something's not right. So this is what we look at. This is what banks and finance companies look at when somebody comes a project. And I will tell you, I get projects. I see 3 or 4 a week come to me, and they want us to finance your projects. And when I talked about the Wild West, what I meant was you have 2 developers in the same market, and they're trying to work a deal with, say, PPL. They're going to set a PPA with PPL, and they negotiate the rate against each other so low, the deal won't cash flow. PPL signs the PPA. I shouldn't use a different number than PPL. It's a lot of PPs, but you have PPL signs a PPA for 2 cents a kilowatt. Well, that deal won't cash flow at 2 cents a kilowatt. So the developer's sitting across the table from me and he says, "Well, I have to bid this. I lost." I said, "Well, you can't generate the capital to build the project. So they've gotten themselves so they're bid against each other so far, the deal doesn't cash flow. So really important to make sure when you're building out your model and you do a cash flow like this, that you got to focus on the consistency of revenue, right? So whether you have a PPA or you're selling into the wholesale market, consistency of revenue is going to be very important to whoever's going to finance your project. Okay, so my last slide, my closing thoughts is here how I would say to you. Okay, when you start to think about developing renewable energy in your community, okay, and I'm not talking about community solar. I'm talking about on buildings. Community solar is a whole nother aspect of community of solar in the industry. But when you're talking about community development on municipal buildings, open fields, and things like that. First question: who's going to use the power? Right? Are you going to do it in front of the meter or behind the meter, right? If you're in front of the meter, then before it hits them, you're just going to power your own buildings and anything else that the utility would need or the municipality would need. Okay, and if you're selling it, are you selling it on a PPA or are you going to sell it to a utility? Because the utilities will sign a PPA as well. But you can get third-party companies to sign PPAs. You get, obviously good-sized companies. You want solid credits, right? And then that last three bullets, I think, are the most critical to anybody getting into the space. Proven developers with a track record of successful projects, meaning they're up and running, they're online. Ask for examples, ask for references on other projects they have up and running, right? The same thing on the EPC contractor. Very important. Don't let them learn on your dime, right? It's very, very costly. And then the legal counsel, you know, I'll close with a story. And we had one of our projects. It was done a couple of years ago, but reasonably sized. It was in the $40 to $50 million installation. But the legal counsel that was on representing the lessee in this case really had no experience. And they charged over $1.1 million in legal fees to our client, the lessee. And in essence, they just learned and taught themselves on their dime. And it's over 1.1. The average cost on a deal like that should have been about $120,000, maybe $200,000 tops. So I can't stress enough to everybody, make sure you're dealing with people that know what they're doing. They've done it before, because without that, it could get extremely expensive and projects can fail. That was never a thought before, but when we opened up the IRA and got all the people involved we had, there are projects that will fail. So just deal with experienced people that know what they're doing, and you have a much better outcome. And with that, I'm done.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, thanks for your years of experience sharing how to finance these. There's lots of opportunities here, and there's also some items that you have to avoid as well along the way. So I guess at this point we will. I just want to thank our presenters, and we'll start the Q&A here now.